Everybody, if you're out there, you need to say good afternoon so that I know you're here, because otherwise it's just going to be me and Rachel Line from San Diego area. My soul child, Rachel Line. Okay. Well, good afternoon and welcome to Wednesdays at 1. I have to apologize first of all for my problem with my internet connection. I should have known they were working in my street, and not only did I get browned out, I got booted in the middle of the conversation between Ruth and Boaz, which I know you were all on tenterhooks as I was talking about that conversation. So I'm going to just jump right in again. I'm going to read chapter 3 again because I've got a number of things I wanted to say about that, which some of them you may have heard and memorized as I was speaking last week, but just some interesting stuff around that chapter. So let me read for you. This is Ruth chapter 3. And this Ruth, you recall, is the daughter-in-law of Naomi. And Boaz is the kinsman that they're going to meet after Ruth has pledged to Naomi that she will not leave her, that she'll go with her, and she'll do whatever Naomi does. She'll be with her, she'll live with her, her people will be my people, and so on and so forth. So, good afternoon. Let's jump right in here and let me read to you Ruth chapter 3. Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, I need to seek some security for you, so that it may be well with you. Now, here is our kinsman Boaz, with whose young women you have been working. See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Now wash and anoint yourself, and put on your best clothes, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, observe the place where he lies, then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do." She said to her, "All that you tell me, I will do." So Ruth went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law had instructed her. When Boaz had eaten and drunk, and he was in a contented mood, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. Then she came stealthily and uncovered his feet and lay down. At midnight, the man was startled and turned over, and there, lying at his feet, was a woman. He said, "Who are you?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your cloak over your servant, for you are next of kin." He said, "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. This last instance of your loyalty is better than the first. You have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not be afraid. I will do for you all that you ask, for all the assembly of my people know that you are a worthy woman. But now, though it is true that I am a near kinsman, there is another kinsman more closely related than I. Remain this night, and in the morning, if he will act as next of kin for you, good, let him do it. If he is not willing to act as next of kin for you, then, as the Lord lives, I will act as next of kin for you. Lie down until the morning." So she lay at his feet until morning, but got up before one person could recognize another, for he said, "It must not be known that a woman came to the threshing floor." Then he said, "Bring the cloak you are wearing and hold it out." So she held it, and he measured out 6 measures of barley and put it on her back. Then he went into the city. She came to her mother in law, who said, "How did things go with you, my daughter?" Then Ruth told her all that the man had done for her, saying, "He gave me these 6 measures of barley, for he said, 'Do not go back to your mother in law empty handed.'" She replied, "Wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today." Okay, the plot thickens. We figure out now what's going to happen here after this interesting little episode that we have between Ruth and Boaz on the threshing floor. And I was beginning to kind of pick through this and answer some questions that you may have, that I'm assuming that you may have about this. It's full of all kinds of symbolism and all kinds of cool things and some practices and cultural issues that you need to know about this. So first of all, Naomi and Ruth have come from Moab. Ruth is a Moabite woman, had married Naomi's son, and then Naomi's Naomi's husband and both of her sons had died. So her 2 daughter-in-laws, one had gone back to her family, but Ruth said, "No, no, I'm going to go with you." So now they have returned, and they to where Naomi came from, which was the land of Judah, and she has brought Ruth with her. But now we've got 2 widows with no means of support, no man, no husbands, no sons, nobody to take care of them. So Naomi hatches this plan for Ruth to get into the good graces of Boaz, and Ruth has suggested that she go out into the fields and help them glean, which was the right of widows, to be able to glean the edges of the field and take food for themselves. But she was working behind the workers and got in with the workers, and they knew who she was. And apparently Boaz had also been watching, knowing that his kinswoman had come back to town and maybe had heard of Ruth. So he had been watching, and when he talks about her, or when they meet, he mentions that he knows who she is and what she's been doing, and he's been blessed by the fact that Naomi has returned. So Boaz is basically Naomi's brother-in-law, the brother of her husband, Elimelech. So now we're having this scene. The day of gleaning and working in the field is over. They've gone to the threshing floor, which would have been an big open air barn where they have taken the wheat, or whatever, the barley, and thrown it up into the air so that the wind would catch the hulls and the chaff from the seed, and then the seed would fall back into baskets, and then they would wrestle it around in the baskets and get rid of any impurities and everything, and that's how they would thresh the barley. So that's where, and that was all men's work. So that was where she would find Boaz during the evening. When she goes, she does exactly what Naomi has instructed her to do. And the first instruction is, wash and anoint yourself and put on your best clothes. Now, the interesting part of that is that washing and anointing was like putting on makeup. Okay. The anointing part was, put on your lipstick and your eyeshadow and get ready to go. But it was also an indication of the end of her mourning period, so that Ruth is now officially, fixing herself up, getting out of her widow's weeds so that she can go out and basically be courted. So she's concluding her time of mourning and preparing herself to go out into society, to have a date, to start to mingle again in the community. And then she is told to go down and find the man. And when he has finished eating and drinking, and he lies down, then go and uncover his feet. This is about where the video ended last week, because I said the word genital. The word feet in Hebrew is a euphemism for the genitals. So what she was told to do was to basically uncover him, and then lie down and then wait to see what he would tell her to do. So she did just exactly that, and she goes and uncovers his feet. and lays down. And then in the middle of the night, Boaz wakes up and asks who she is. And she says, I am Ruth, your servant. And the first thing that she says to him is, spread your cloak over your servant, for you are the next of kin. Now, this is now we know what she's up to. Okay, she's not here just to have sex. She wants this man to marry her, because the language of this, spreading your cloak, it was the tradition at that time. When a man wanted to marry a woman, he would take off his cloak and throw it around her shoulders as a symbol of the fact that he was going to protect her, and that was one of the courtship rituals. So here again, this is the language they're using, is to, spread your cloak over me. But the other thing that's interesting is the word used for cloak in Hebrew is kanap, Kanap, and a couple of verses earlier in the second chapter, Boaz is talking to Naomi, and oh, wait a minute, is he talking to Naomi? No, he's talking to Ruth. And he says in 2:12, may the Lord reward you for your deeds of taking care of Naomi, and may you have a full reward from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge. And the Hebrew word for wings is kanapim, which is basically the same word for cloak. So a man would put a cloak around a woman the way God would put his wings of protection around a person. So there's kind of a nice play on words there, in regard to both God protecting us and then a husband protecting his wife. So that's kind of neat language there that you may not have caught. And then this idea is, for you are the next of kin. And most of us are pretty aware of the cultural deal that came through the Leviticus texts of what happens when a woman's husband dies and she has no male heir to take care of her. The husband's brothers are the next ones in line, or next of kin, would be required to take her on as a wife and try to give her sons such that she would have someone to support her in her old age. That person was called a Goel, Goel. Um, and it's kind of El is the word for God, so it's kind of the protector, stand in for God. Okay, that while God's wings are protecting her, now she needs a human cloak to protect her as well. So Goel, the people who were the next of kin, were expected to go ahead and take on that role as a Goel. And so that's what she was asking him to do. That this is the brother of her father-in-law. Her husband has no living relatives except for the father and the uncle. So she comes to him and says, basically, do what it is that you're supposed to do. You are the next of kin. And he says, the fact that you are asking me to take on this role is lovely, because you have not gone after the young or the rich, but you have come to me as next of kin, and apparently a much older man. And so he says, I will do for you all that you ask, and all the assembly of my people know that you are a worthy woman. And then he says, but even though I am your kinsman, there is one who is closer. So now we have to check with him and see if he's willing to take on this role that is really his responsibility. And if he says that he will not, then I will take on that role for you. So she's won the jackpot here. She's either going to go ahead and have someone who will fulfill that Levirate role in her life, or Boaz will take the position. Now she laid at his feet until morning and got up, and everybody wonders, did they have sex, or and there are a whole section of rabbinic writings. If this is something of interest to you, you can go to Google and find some of this, the Targum, and just all different kinds of writings of legends and thoughts that different rabbis had about, did they consummate? Did they not? This is why they would have. This is why they wouldn't have. And all kinds of legends and conversations that are really kind of fun to read. So if you want to read some of that, you can look that up on Google. What happened between Ruth and Boaz in chapter 3 before chapter 4 happened. So anyway, She gets up early and leaves. He gives her this stash of barley to take back with her, and everything is really good because they're expecting now he'll go and work this out. So, chapter 4. I'm not seeing anyone posting, so I'm assuming you are just raptly listening with great attention. So I'll go ahead and read chapter 4. No sooner had Boaz gone up to the gate and sat down there than the next of kin of whom Boaz had spoken came passing by. What a coincidence. So Boaz said, "Come over, friend, and sit down here." And he went over and sat down. Then Boaz took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, "Sit down here." So they sat down. He then said to the next of kin, "Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our kinsman Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, the land, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me so that I may know, for there is no one prior to you to redeem it, and I come after you." So he said, "I will redeem it." Then Boaz said, "The day you acquire the field from the hand of Naomi, you are also acquiring Ruth the Moabite, the widow of the dead man, to maintain the dead man's name on his inheritance." At this, the next of kin said, "I cannot redeem it for myself without damaging my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption for yourself, for I cannot redeem it." I'm going to stop there and go back because there's a bunch of things in here that are helpful as you just think about how this transaction has happened. And this is one of the few places that we actually have kind of the finagling between two men of means and how they actually did business. The first thing we notice is that it says, "No sooner had Boaz gone up to the gate." The gate of the city, which was the gate into the wall of these walled cities in the day, was the place where business was done. Usually, if there was a judge, the judge's office or tent or wherever he was nearby to the gate, so that people coming in and out to trade or to do commerce he was freeway close. They would come in the gate of the city and, immediately be able to find a judge or someone who was responsible for taking care of these kind of legal matters. Now, these would be really sort of become religiously legal matters, but right now in this section, the time right after the judges, we're talking more about cultural traditions that were upheld, almost as tightly as law. So they're at the city gates, which also reminds me of that there's a passage in, I think it's in Acts, where Paul is out and he is right outside the city gates, and he sees outside the city gates there's a brook or a stream or something, and that's where the women are washing clothes. And so he goes down to the river to speak to the women. Now that's what happened, after part of the culture was everyone would get up in the morning and go to the gates. The men would go there to sit around and drink coffee and do business, and the women would go down to the river to do the laundry, as it always has been. The guys are smoking cigars and drinking whiskey in the wood paneled study, and the women go take a nap or whatever. But the distancing between the two, the men and the women of the town. So, and that's where, actually, to finish out that story, that's where Paul runs into Lydia and her household and tells about Jesus, and then they are all converted, and even her whole household is baptized that day. So we're at the gate of the city. That's where transactions are made, where legal things unfold. And so Boaz goes and sits down there with the next of kin, and he actually has been passing by. But then Boaz took 10 men of the city, of the elders of the city. 10 is important here because it took 10 men to make a minyan, and a minyan is what you required to have a synagogue, okay, or any kind of a court, any kind of business transacted. This is more than just a witness where you need two witnesses. Like this guy stole my oxen, and then you'd have to have two witnesses that talked about it. But to create a pact or to create some kind of agreement that's going to have to go through generations, you need 10. So you need a minion, and that's what he put together. And then he sits down and he talks to this guy. There's kind of another thing where he says, come over, friend, and sit here. And the translation of the word friend there in Hebrew is, there's not really a translation, but it's kind of like, you guy, come over here, like so and so or such and such. It's not, you would assume that if he was behind this person's name would be known to him. But instead of calling him, Isaiah, come over here and sit, he calls him friend, which may be an indication that they are not really friends or not really good relatives where he could just do this. He does it immediately in open air with 10 relative or 10 elders present, so that you know that this could be a contentious arrangement that's coming. So that kind of adds some of the excitement to what's going on. Okay, so the kinsman says that he will redeem the land and buy it back from Naomi and restore it to the family. And then Boaz drops the extra part, which is, and oh, by the way, when you buy the land, you're also buying Ruth, or you get Ruth as well. Acquiring is the word. So you are acquiring Ruth, and this is the task of the next of kin. So now this transaction has become less of just a land trade, and more of a lifestyle. Oh my goodness, now we're talking about I'm adding a wife, someone that I'm supposed to impregnate, so that she can have a son to take care of her in her old age. And apparently he already has a situation where he is within getting his own inheritance from Elimelech, and he's afraid, and he uses this as the excuse. If I make this transaction, that will endanger my inheritance. And so that's like, oh yeah, no, I'm not going to make this deal. So now I'm giving you the opportunity to redeem this land for yourself, and then you can deal with Ruth. So let me continue to read. Now this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging. To confirm a transaction, the one took off a sandal and gave it to the other. This was the manner of attesting in Israel. So when the next of kin said to Boaz, acquire it for yourself, he took off his sandal. Then Boaz said to the elders and all the people, today you are witnesses that I have acquired from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech, and all that belonged to Chilion and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite, the wife of Mahlon, to be my wife, to maintain the dead man's name on his inheritance, in order that the name of the dead may not be cut off from his kindred and from the gate of his native place. Today you are witnesses. Then all the people who were at the gate, along with the elders, said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you produce children in Ephrathah and bestow a name in Bethlehem. And through the children that the Lord will give you by this young woman, may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. When they came together, the Lord made her conceive, and she bore a son. Then the women said to Naomi, blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without next of kin, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has borne him. Then Naomi took the child and laid him in her bosom and became his nurse. The women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, a son has been born to Naomi. They named him Obed. He became the father of Jesse, the father of David. So here we have the reason why we have Ruth's story. What the story that started out with Naomi, the mother-in-law, and now it's going to end with Naomi again. But Ruth is the one who's going to become the one who appears in the genealogy of David and then eventually of Jesus. Um, and then it finishes out with the genealogy. But I wanted to call your attention to this is where we know kind of in the back of our mind some of these stories, but the way that one of the things I have always had problems with as far as education of children in Sunday school is we know all these people and all their stories, but we don't know how they fit together. So if you will recall, Tamar in Genesis 38, and you can read her story if you want to as a wonderful story, and I think you've probably heard it before. She also was a widow, and she disguised herself as a prostitute and sat on the roadway in and out of town, specifically to seduce Judah. Now, Judah was the eldest son of the 12 tribes. Okay, so he had the most of everything. He had the best land. He had everything. Firstborn son. Okay, Judah. And he had withheld the Levitical rite of marriage from Tamar um, because she had been widowed of one of his sons, and then she had asked for this his second son to be given to her, as the Levitical code said that she would have the next son. And before they could get that worked out, the second son died. And then the third son should have been the one, but he was born at that point, so she would have had to wait for him to grow. And Judah had said, when he comes of age, I'll give him to you as your husband, but he never did that. So he had sort of reneged on kind of taking care of Tamar. So the story in Genesis 38 is that she sits on the side of the road dressed as a prostitute, and he comes to her and says, euphemistically, no, he says, let me go into you, thinking she's a temple prostitute. And she says, what will you give me? And he says, I'll give you a kid from the flock. And she says, well, how about if you give me something collateral, something that I can hold so that I know for sure I'm going to get this kid from your flock. So he gives her some of his personal belongings, a signet ring, a tassel, a staff, just a number of items that he was carrying with him. So after he goes into her, he leaves, and the kid shows up, but she says she doesn't want it, and she keeps the personal items. It isn't until the youngest son comes of age, that she confronts him and says, you owe me big time, because the son has come of age. You haven't given to me, but now I am with child, and this child, it belongs to a man who came to me who is unknown. And Judah questions her and says, well, we must find this man. And she displays to him these personal items that he had given her, and so he knows that she knows that he knows that she knows. So together, that Tamar has a baby with her father-in-law, and that child is named Perez. Actually, she has two, and has twins. So the very last part of this reading in Ruth 4 is the genealogy of David, and I'm going to read it just because there's a point I want to make here. Now these are the descendants of Perez, the son of Tamar and Judah. Perez became the father of Hezron, Hezron of Ram, Ram of Aminadab, Aminadab of Nahshon, Nahshon of Salmon, Salmon of Boaz, Boaz of Obed, Obed of Jesse, and Jesse of David. Now, if you were writing these down, as I would say, you would notice that Boaz is the seventh in this line, which makes it important, and David is the 10th. So in this lineage, all kind names have number significance, and lineage has number significance. So the fact that as we start from the 12 tribes, Judah, the representative of the 12 tribes, the sons of Jacob, then we have from him 7 generations to Boaz, and then 3 more generations to get to 10. And these are both numbers of completion in Scripture, and David is the 10th in that line. So those are places of honor in the genealogical list, 7 and 10, and they are occupied by Boaz and then finally David. And so the purpose of this whole story is that as we are talking about um, the family of Naomi and the family of Ruth, who will be the great grandmother of David, that we are also now talking about a national story because David was the ultimate king, the ultimate hero of the people. For probably to this day, David was the guy. He was the greatest king ever. And so when we tell about David's background and David's lineage, we are also telling the story of Ruth and Naomi. So that's why it is here. And I think I mentioned before in a Christian Bible, where the Hebrew Bible is our Old Testament, um, the story of Ruth comes chronologically in just right after the book of Judges. So she is living in the time of the Judges. It is set within the wisdom literature of the Jewish Bible. If you were Jewish and just had the Torah, then you would find Ruth's story in among the stories of what they call the wisdom literature. So different placements of it in the cycle. So this is background now to move from the stories of the judges to move into the David cycles. And you will notice if you know the Old Testament rap, it goes Ruth, 2 Sams, 2 Kings, 2 Chronicles, and those 6 books are really the story of how David became king, and then what happened to him and who followed him, and the story of his descendants as well. So those are kind of the high points of Ruth. And boy, nobody's talking to me today. So and I see you're there, but I can't see that anybody's talking. So we don't really don't have anything more to say about Ruth. And unless you have a question and you want to post that, um, I am thinking in terms of picking up a couple of little books, things that we can do in 1 hour, and maybe do a couple of weeks of that just to kind of bounce around. And then I do think I want to start again and start reading in Genesis. And because Luther always talked about if you had the book of Genesis and Psalms, you had the whole story. Not now, isn't that interesting that he didn't include, oh, and by the way, we need to have Jesus' story in there too. But he felt like I think he probably would have indicated a gospel, but he was an Old Testament professor. Okay, um, so he thought in Genesis and in Psalms is everything you need to know about what's going to happen when Jesus comes, when the Messiah is come. So that's kind of all I have today. You get a short one, and I hope you go outside and enjoy the rest of the day because it is absolutely gorgeous outside, and tomorrow it's going to be really, really hot. So so this is your permission to go outside for recess. We're in class a little early today, and I appreciate you being with me. And next time, I'm thinking this might not be a one session, but oh, Melissa and Rob say I'm not seeing your questions. Oh, why am I not seeing your questions? I do not know. She texted me. Wait a second. We may not be done. If you're already gone, see ya. Let's see. Okay, let's see. Read me the questions. Okay, I don't know why. I'll type something in and see if it'll make the scroll go. Oh, okay. I'm still not. I got a couple, but that was just mine. Have you got, can you see them? Oh, thank you. Would Naomi have just as much right to have Boaz as a spouse? Wouldn't Naomi? Yes, Naomi would have that right, but apparently she was okay with being on her own and really was more concerned about taking care of um, Ruth, because Naomi is coming back to her homeland, and she obviously has some wealth, um, but maybe not enough to take care of her just out of her own resources. And also, what the assumption is that Ruth is much younger, and so Ruth should have, have a husband and have children of her own. But that's what's so sweet about the end of the story, where they put the baby in Naomi's hands and say, um, the ladies around are saying this Naomi now has a son. So in a certain sense, she's got a baby to take care of as well. Okay, Melissa posted. I find it interesting in the study Bible, Luther says that the union of Ruth and Boaz was a union of Gentile and Jew, which shows that God is not only the God of the Jews, but also the God of the Gentiles. Oh, that's cool. Good old Lutheran study Bible. Yeah, and I think you also have um, you have that runs through the Old Testament too, and we just seem to have forgotten that, that there are often times where Jews and Gentiles mix, and have children together and do all kinds of stuff. Um, so okay, I am still not seeing the Blake questions. So, and I'm using somebody's phone, not somebody. I'm using Brenda's phone. Um, And I see a couple of people says they're on in those two questions, but that's the end. And Peggy says I'm not seeing the questions either. Must be having a question problem today. I think Facebook wanted to go outside. So Melissa and Rob, you're just going to have to text me your question and I'll answer it privately, or maybe I'll answer it next week. Okay. Okay. So thanks for watching, or sort of watching, listening at this amended version of Wednesdays at 1. And we will see you next week with a surprise story. She's laughing. I see that now. I see LOL, Melissa. So I see that you're here. So sorry about that. I don't know why the scroll isn't working today. Whatever. So have a great week, and I will see you, or you will see me on Sunday. Don't forget, if you're coming to parking lot to the tailgate worship at 8:30, you need to sign up on the website so you can see that. And there's also information. There's also information about that in the blast that you got yesterday. No, today. Did they get that today or yesterday? Yesterday, and you'll get another one on Friday to remind you. So have a great day. Enjoy the outside, and I will see you soon. Thanks for studying the Bible.